Hi, everyone. My name is Cornelia Davis, and I work for Pivotal, the sponsor for the CALIBRATE conference. And I wanted to start out by telling you a little bit about how it is I came to choose this topic. So I was introduced to Rob just a couple of months ago, or maybe even less, through a colleague of ours, a mutual acquaintance. And he said, yeah, you know, Janice said that we should talk to you. We're doing this CALIBRATE thing. And he described the notion of this conference. And I said, management, you know, teaching new managers, you know, I'm not sure I'm the right person for you. Because first of all, I'll tell you that I've been doing this for about 25 years, and in my 25 years, the number of people that I have managed in terms of under an org chart, I can count on my two hands. I am not a career-long manager. But over the years, and especially the longer I've been doing this, I've heard people refer to me as a leader. And so, you know, if you're looking for management fundamentals, probably not me. I have some direct reports, and they would probably tell you I'm an okay manager, but not a great one. I'm an okay manager. I'm not somebody who spends, oh, good God, 15 hours a week on one-on-ones. I was like, seriously? I do not do that. In fact, if you get a one-on-one with me, they're not regularly scheduled. They do happen, but they're really sporadic. I travel a lot. I spend a lot of time with customers, so they don't happen. I am better than one boss that I had once who literally slid a piece of paper over to me while I was sitting in a customer meeting with him that had my old salary and my new salary, and he nodded at me and said, "Good job." Okay, I'm better than that. And by the way, he was a great leader. And so as I was chatting with Rob about it, we kind of realized that maybe that was a topic right there. And it's been referred to a couple of times in various other talks today. But what we decided on would be we riffed on this for a half hour or so. We said, you know what, let's talk about that. Let's talk about management and leadership. And so I'll move to the first slide, and you'll see here that it says management versus leadership, but with a question mark in it. And so the other thing that I'll tell you honestly is that this is a new talk that I built because, like I said, somehow people sometimes refer to me as a leader, and I guess maybe that fits, but I never really consciously said, I want to be a leader, and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. But over the course of the last month, as I've been thinking about this talk and putting it together, I got very concrete about, okay, what is it? What has been useful for me? What are the techniques that I use that maybe I didn't think of as techniques, but could be repeatable? And that's really what this talk is about. I also did some research. So I started looking at what are people saying about management and about leadership, and I found lots of articles out there that had titles of management versus leadership. So they had things on it, and you can see there's a couple of the references down at the bottom, and you can do Googling, and you'll find lots and lots of articles that are very similar. And it says things like, well, managers focus on systems and structure, but leaders focus on people. And they say that, but. Or a manager does things right, but a leader does the right thing. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, these things don't seem mutually exclusive. And so I'm really bad at keeping punchlines to the end, so that's the punchline. They aren't mutually exclusive, but we'll get back to the punchline in just a moment. Managers have people who work for them, leaders have people who follow them. That one is absolutely true, but again, not mutually exclusive. So I won't read the rest of these, but really the point here is that that's what you see when you go out and you start doing a little bit of research out there. Now, the other thing that I think is really interesting that I reflected upon when I was doing this research was that the world that we live in. So by 2020, 50% of the workforce, the general workforce in this country are going to be millennials. Now, I kind of get millennials a little bit because I have one. My son is 20. He's a junior in college now. So I understand some of these things. But in technology, and especially here in the Silicon Valley and in San Francisco, I think the percentage, we don't have to wait till 2020. The world that we live in today is we're managing a lot of millennials today, probably more than 50% already. And so I think it's really important for us to think about management and leadership from that perspective, because things are changing. And there has been references to that in other talks as well. Ryan was talking about, for example, kind of manufacturing work, and a lot of the work that was done decades ago was a little bit more like that, and perhaps not as creative as the work that we do today. Obviously, we're employing a lot more software engineers today than we did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago. I mean, sure, way, way different. And millennials do have a different style of working, and I have hired some, and it was interesting to me that I'll share one story with you that when I went to interview for my first job in my little suit, I didn't show up in jeans, I showed up in a suit, I bought it especially for the interview, and I got the job. I was just damn grateful to have a job. Now when I interview folks and I make them an offer, they're like, I'll let you know. And I'm like, okay. And it's a little jarring, but it reflects a difference in culture. We just talked about culture, but it reflects a difference in values as well. Some of the things that are written about this are mistrusting authority. Authority and I don't think it's as blanket as that. They certainly are looking to people who are managers and leaders for guidance, but they are never going to buy the because I said so. That's not going to happen. Collaborative. They're looking for meaningful work. They don't want to just do something. They want to know why they're doing it. And that's something, I'm not a millennial, but that's something that I can totally relate to. And they're present. They don't want to be thinking about what happened 5 years ago or even 5 weeks ago or what we might be doing 5 years in the future. They're really present. What's the value that I can bring today? So these things are really good contextual things to have. Another thing that I learned about when I was doing the research was Peter Drucker. Now, he's a management consultant, or was a management consultant, passed away in 2005. He did all of his work in the 20th century, but it was really tremendously insightful, and there's really great stuff that he's written. So I wanted to point you to him as well. And really what he focused on there was, if you remember a couple of slides ago, was managing work versus managing people, or guiding people, leading people. He was already on it decades ago. It's all about people. It's all about individuals and every individual. So those are just some guidelines, I think, that I wanted to share some of that as I learned as I was researching this. So what I want to do now is really go into that set of things that when I reflected back on my career and maybe a little bit about how I got where I am today, these are the things that I kind of decided were the key elements of my style. The first one is find your passion. So last year for my birthday, my dad got me a new iPad. My dad is 85 years old, and he's kind of a little bit of a techie. And I said, the only thing I want special is I want you to engrave it for me. And then it came my birthday, and I opened my birthday present, and the best part about the present was looking at the engraving. And I flipped it over, and he said, "For the girl who lives to work." And I'm like, yeah, he gets me. And it's because I love what I do. Absolutely love what I do. And that, I think, is one of the most important things that you can do to become a leader, because you will bring people along. If you dread what you're doing, you may be a manager, but you're going to have a hard time bringing along the masses. But if you love what you do, enthusiasm is simply infectious. Now, the other thing that I'll say, though, is that it's not, don't go with your passion. The first part there says find your passion. So you might have to look a little bit. One of the things I do love to do now is I do love to speak. I love to speak at conferences. I love just being in a forum like this. But a couple of decades ago, no friggin' way. I would have been petrified. And I was in graduate school and I was teaching, for example, and I gave my first couple of lectures and it was kind of okay. And then my professor came in and evaluated me, gave me feedback, and she said, you were kind of And it would have been really easy for me then to say, okay, that's not for me. But I really decided that I wanted to push through outside of my comfort zone, and ended up finding that there's something that I really love to do here. So it's really about finding your passion. You sometimes have to go outside of your comfort zone to get there. Now the next one is, I couldn't help but put this picture in. It's not the right picture. You'll see what the right picture is in just a moment. I love this picture, genuine fake watches. I thought that was so clever. But really the next thing is to be genuine. Now, I've mentioned that I haven't been a manager too often, but there were times in my career where I either, for example, I remember the first time that I was a manager and I got a direct report, or when I maybe reached a point in my career where I thought, okay, maybe now I need to go get a little different wardrobe because I've gotten to someplace. Or maybe I can't say freaking on stage anymore. And the reality is that be genuine, be yourself. Don't be too formal. I have seen that over and over again, especially with people who are starting there relatively earlier in their career. They're starting to get some advancement and they start to feel like they need to be a certain way. I'm a manager now. I can't be quite as kind of laid back with people, and that just doesn't work. I've seen that over and over. It just doesn't work. You want to be approachable. You want people to open up to you. And then the other thing that I'll say is that you certainly want to look around and watch other people. And you pick up on things and you pick up on techniques and you say, okay, that's something that kind of resonates with me. And imitation is great, but make it your own style. Make it your own style. That's really important. And a couple of other things, be vulnerable. This is something that I still struggle with daily, is getting to that point where you say, you know what, I had a really crappy day today, or I went in and I pitched that and I just totally flubbed it. It was really bad. And allowing yourself to be vulnerable and allowing people to see you that way, that's genuine. And when you're genuine, people will connect with you. And when people connect with you, good things happen. And the last thing that I'll tell you is that one of the things that I've personally struggled with, and have gotten to the point now, I'm almost 50 now, so is really finding that your unique voice is your unique voice. Your voice brings something. And so be genuine. You don't have to be corporate. You don't have to have a certain persona because you are now a manager or because you're perceived as a leader. You're going to be perceived as a leader because you've been genuine and because your unique voice is a value. So that's another tip. Another one is say yes a lot. And I mean that really in two different ways. Now, I am one of those people that I have about enough things that I'm interested in that I want to do where I need like 5 lifetimes to do them. If I wasn't doing tech, I would have a gluten-free bakery. I would certainly have a blog around gluten-free. I would be doing lots of work in women who code and that kind of stuff. I get to do some of that as a technologist, but I have lots of things. And so I have this horrible habit of when people come to me and say, hey, there's this really cool thing, will you do it? I go, yep. And you have to be a little bit careful, of course. You can't always say yes because then you overpromise and you underdeliver. But saying yes a lot and showing that enthusiasm on its own, I think is a really important leadership quality. If you are somebody who just naturally gives a knee-jerk no, naturally gives the Heisman, you're not going to inspire. So knee-jerk yes, You can always back off of that, but I like the knee-jerk yes. I think that's an important thing. The other way that I like to think about saying yes is when people are not asking things of you, but when people are asking you to do something. They want to do something, and they want your blessing, your endorsement, your support. And that's a really important thing. So let me just share a story. By the way, that's a really important thing for parenting as well. I saw that there were only a third of you or so that are parents. I was in Menlo Park last week, and I was walking down the street, and there was this mom, and she had a little 3-year-old boy. And they walked past Susie Cakes, and he said, "Oh, Mommy, what's that?" And she said, "Oh, that's a cake store." And he said, "Can we have cake?" And she said, "Absolutely, we are going to have cake on a special occasion." And I loved that answer. And of course, the 3-year-old was like, "Why can't we have cake now?" And continued walking down the street, absolute total meltdown. And she just kept walking along with him saying, "I am looking forward to that day that we are going to have cake." And I was like, "You are fabulous." She was just really awesome. And I just love that story because it's kind of representative. But when you take it back into the work world, I think it is really important to support people and to promote people. And so that's what I mean. Say yes when people ask things of you, but also say yes when people are asking for your support and your mentorship. That's really important as well. Another one that I've seen lots of negative examples, and it's certainly been something that I needed to work on as well, and that is involve others. As a leader, you cannot do it alone. You cannot have this attitude of, well, if you want it done right, you got to do it yourself. Because as a leader means you have folks around you. And you can't lead if you're just setting the tone and you're just doing all of the work. So you need to involve other people. And this actually turns out to be an awful lot of fun as well. So I'll share another story with you. About 3 weeks ago was our Spring One conference. So if you didn't know, Spring is part of Pivotal. And Spring One was about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Anybody at Spring One? No, okay. So the Spring One conference was a few weeks ago, and a colleague of mine, doesn't work for me, but a colleague of mine about 3 weeks before said, "Hey, if you want to bounce any ideas off of me for your talk, I'd love to help." And I said, "Great." And I, of course, because I say yes all the time, am often doing things like working on talks at like 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night. And so I was thinking, oh, I can't collaborate with him on that. And I actually took a moment where I said, well, wait a minute, why don't you join me? And I'll tell you that 10 years ago or 8 years ago, I remember seeing Spring One and thinking, someday I would really like to present at Spring One. And about 3 years ago, I had my first chance. And so then I worked with this colleague, and we worked together on the talk, and we figured out a way to do it at 10 o'clock at night or asynchronously. And when we went to Spring One, and we got to our speaking session about 20 minutes ahead of time, and we were stepping onto the stage, he looked at me and he said, "This is surreal." And I had this moment where I realized this is his moment from 3 years ago. 5 years ago, he was saying, someday I want to be on the Spring One stage. Someday I want to present there. And he looked at me and said, "This is surreal." And then after the talk, which went really well, and people were mobbing him afterward about, will you come do this talk here? Will you do it there? And all of that stuff. He tweeted, "I just had the best morning ever." And that was fabulous. So here's somebody who I am certain is going to pay it forward again sometime. So involve others. That one's really important. The next one, I already said I love to speak. And leaders need to speak. Now, I know that here we are in software, and Rob, right from the first thing this morning, said I'm an introvert. And I know introverts have a really hard time. And believe it or not, I'm standing up here on stage, and I've told you that I love to speak, but I'm horribly introverted. When it comes to parties, I'm like, especially parties where I don't know the folks, I want to sneak away. Even my best friends, if it's a very large party, I kind of tiptoe off. But being an introvert and speaking are compatible. You can do that. Now, it may make you extraordinarily uncomfortable in the beginning, but this is something that can be learned. It's also something that, like I said, it can be learned and practiced, and it will come over time. One of the first talks that I did, conference talks that I did, there were 3 people in the room, and one of them was the conference organizer. So it wasn't a really successful conference, but still, and I could have sat there and said, oh God, that was a miserable failure, but I just took it as a learning opportunity, a chance to practice. The other thing that's really important about being able to speak is that it does give you a voice, and leaders need to have a voice, obviously. The final thing that I'll mention is that my title slide actually said that I'm the Director of Platform Engineering at Pivotal. I've just recently, in the last week or two, been moving into a new role. We have a transformation practice. It turns out that transforming the way that people build software is not just a technology challenge, and so we have a practice in place that's helping large enterprises are our customers, do that transformation. And one of the techniques that we're working on with those large enterprises is what we call executive storytelling. One of our clients is Allstate, for example, and I was chatting with a colleague earlier. The average tenure of somebody working at Allstate is 35 years. So we're going to be in there trying to change a culture, and we have some executive champions who are like, we know we need to change. How are we going to do that? An important part of that is getting the executives at these companies to inspire, to speak, to have their voice. So that's really an important part of leadership as well. And of course, it's not just speaking, it's also listening. And I won't spend a lot of time talking about that, but I was with one of those executives at Allstate last week, and we were there for 2 hours, and I probably spoke for about 30 seconds. It was all about listening to his culture and listening to the challenges that he had, and that is equally important. Shake things up. Do not stay in your swim lanes. So leaders don't just do their job. They work with their peers, and we heard that earlier in a talk as well. Having those peer relationships is extremely important. And your function, your business function, does not exist in isolation. So it has impacts on these other things, and do work in those other things. Don't just stay in your swim lanes. I'll give you an example just from last night. I'm working on Gene Kim's DevOps Enterprise Summit. So I'm working with that team to put on that conference next month. And Gene reached out and said, hey, would Pivotal like to do some promoting of the event? We're in the middle of selling tickets. And I said, oh, let me check it out. So I sent an email off to our marketing department, and they said, sure, we'll promote your talk, and we'll use these Twitter handles. And I could have very easily said, okay, and walked away, and I said, no, wait a minute, that's not what I mean. Let me tell you a little bit about who Gene Kim is. Our marketing folks weren't as aware of his background. I said, let me tell you a little bit more about who Gene Kim is and the DevOps movement and the Phoenix Project and all of these things, and I explained that, and they were like, oh, that is a great thing for us to associate ourselves with. We'll absolutely promote. So that was me getting into the knitting of the marketing department, but I think there's going to be a very, very good result from that. So those are the types of examples that I'm talking about. And finally, one of my favorite ones is that if you've ever heard me, some of you may have heard me say this before, I consider myself a change junkie. I have to have change. When I was younger, we moved around a fair bit. For every 2 or 3 years we moved, and I remember once saying to my mom, when are we going to move again? And she was like, oh God, I don't want to move again. And and my dad's referred to me as a gypsy. I have to have constant change, which, great, I'm in the tech world. So things are changing all the time. And that, I think, especially all of us working in the tech industry, is do not shy away from change. And in fact, look for it, embrace it. Embracing and looking for change demonstrates a certain level of curiosity, and curiosity is a really, really important leadership trait. And so I'll kind of close with that one. So in summary, let's go back to some of those management versus leadership things and kind of look at it now based on some of the kind of personal experience that I shared with you. So managers have people working for you. Absolutely, you have people working for you. And it is your role as a leader to empower them, to help them find their passion. You aren't the only person that needs to be passionate about what you do. You need to help the people that work for you find their passion. Promote them, and I don't mean in title or money. I mean, tell them, push them to the front. Give them the opportunities. That one's really important. You have to do things right, and you have to bring structure. That's what managers do. And you're going to expand that. You're going to expand beyond that structure, and you're going to allow the people who work for you to do the same thing as well. You are not only doing things right and bringing structure, but you are looking at the horizon, and you are having a can-do, knee-jerk can-do. You are unique. You are absolutely unique, and you want to let your voice be heard, and you can make the call. One of the things that I didn't share in my personal experience that I'll share now is that in the beginning, I have been a manager a few times, and earlier in my career, I kind of felt like, okay, my job is to manage to the corporate goals. But really, your unique voice is an important part of that. So make the call at times. That's it. So thank you very much. And I don't know if I have time for questions. 2 questions? 2 questions.